It's no secret that I'm a huge Elder Scrolls fan, and you'll know from my Fallout's Cosmic Horror video that I'm a bit of a fan of H.P. Lovecraft as well. So how is that relevant to Tamriel's world of fantasy? Well, lurking beneath the obvious story beats and surface lore is a strong undercurrent of cosmic horror that winds its way through the Elder Scrolls series. From bizarre entities that whisper maddening secrets to forbidden texts that warp reality, Tamriel secretly ticks many Lovecraftian boxes. In fact, once you notice it, it's hard to unsee. The world of the Elder Scrolls is steeped in fear of the unknown, stories of strangeness and otherness carefully woven into its lore. Rather than follow the game release order, we're going to explore these cosmic horror moments from an in-universe timeline perspective with a few thematic detours linking Elder Scrolls events to their Lovecraftian inspirations. So, we're going to take a look at all that. I should also add that a lot of what is being discussed here will be my interpretations of the research I did, since there's a lot of metaphysical or complex lore. So, if you disagree on a point, I just want you to know that I'm not stating absolutely everything in this video as something I'd bet my life on. As much as possible, I've tried to make this clear throughout the video. Also, if I've missed anything, feel free to pick me up on that. I've tried my best to be thorough, but the topic is so huge. Obviously, beforehand, I have to say thank you to all my channel members and remind you that the algorithm is driven by engagement, so please make sure to help me out by giving a like, hyping, commenting, and, if you want more of this content, make sure to subscribe as well. Anyway, let's get on with the video. We're going to start our journey in the Dawn era. Long before mortals walked Nirn, the Elder Scrolls universe was born from a dream, allegedly. In obscure lore, which really is based on Michael Kirkbride's Godhead concept, everything is the dream of an eternal mind, the Godhead, an idea uncannily similar to Lovecraft's Azathoth, the blind idiot god said to dream the cosmos. Fans have often likened the Godhead to Azathoth, as both are unconscious dreamers outside reality. In Tamriel's creation myth, the primordial forces Anu and Padome created a pantheon of spirits, and one trickster spirit, Lorkhan, convinced others to help form the mortal world. This didn't end well for Lorkhan. Once Mundus, the world, was made, the other Aedra tore Lorkhan's heart out in vengeance, killing him. According to some in-universe cultures, his divine corpse was flung into the sky, becoming the two moons Masser and Secunda. Yes, it's entirely possible that Tamriel's moonlight comes from a dead god's body. If that isn't a cosmic horror image, what is? Imagine looking up at night and realising the moon is literally the sundered corpse of a deity silently watching over the world, a grim reminder of godly violence. But the horror doesn't end there. Lorkhan's heart, still beating with the divine spark, was hidden deep in the earth at Red Mountain. For eras it pulsed in the darkness, an engine of divine energy, essentially a dead god's heart that can corrupt and empower. This concept feels straight out of cosmic horror, an artifact of primal void, a piece of the primal void trapped on Nirn that warps existence around it. Its heartbeat whispers into the world from some place between realities. In Lovecraft terms, it's as if the heart of an elder god lies buried under a volcano, subtly poisoning the land with its baleful resonance. We're going to take a deeper look at the primordial chaos that existed before the creation of reality now, and comment a bit on the creation of the Aedra and Daedra as well. As we looked at earlier, in Elder Scrolls creation myths, before any of the familiar divines or demons existed, there was the Void, an infinite, formless expanse of Padomaic chaos. The monomyth describes how Anu and Padome, the primal forces of stasis and change, arose in the Void and fought. From their conflict, the blood of Padome gave birth to the Daedra, and the mingled blood of both birthed the mortal Aedra. This implies that Padome, otherwise known as Sithis, pure chaos, predated and fathered all the Daedra. In other words, even the Daedric princes are but younger spawn of an older unknowable void. And this void is depicted as an endless nothingness outside the known world, so hostile that even the Daedra fear to peer into it. Mortals who brush against the void go mad or are unmade by the experience. Lore even hints that a few strange life forms do dwell in the void, blessedly few and strange beyond imagining. In one obscure account from Elder Scrolls Online describing an alternate reality, a group of ancient mages discovered terrifying entities pushing through the void into Nirn, unlike any spirit or Daedra seen before. The largest of these horrors gazed upon the mortals with a single unblinking eye, and those who met its stare were obliterated, unmade by the sight alone. The scholars cast magical nets to repel the invading void creatures, but ultimately the veil of reality tore asunder, and everything was consumed by the coming of these formless horrors. Reading that account, you can't help but shudder. It sounds like a page from Lovecraft. These padomaic entities from the formless void are true cosmic horrors. Formless, mind-shattering forces that make even Daedric princes seem tame. They're less like the petty, knowable demons of Oblivion and more like Lovecraft's outer gods, limitless chaos given shape, or lack of shape. The ancient Dark Elves had a saying, "The uncultivated land of monsters is the rule." It captures this idea that raw reality is inherently monstrous until the gods impose order. The void is the natural state, seething chaos, and the Aedra and Daedra are the temporary aberrations. Contemplating such formless powers is a special kind of existential dread. In Tamriel's cosmos, the princes of Oblivion at least have personalities and spheres of influence, but out in the void beyond them there may be nameless forces that simply are. Pure chaos that cares not for mortal comprehension. In this universe where even the gods have parents, the void stands as the ultimate unknown ancestor. An infinite dark ocean from which reality briefly rises and into which it may one day fall. Even the Elder Scrolls themselves carry this eerie vibe. These mystical scrolls are said to contain all past and future truths, but reading one is perilous. The ancient cult of the Ancestor Moth discovered that unprotected readers of an Elder Scroll can be driven mad or permanently blinded by the overload of cosmic knowledge. Only seasoned moth priests can safely handle them, and even they gradually lose their sight as the price for glimpsing the scroll's secrets. It's a classic Lovecraftian idea that knowledge comes at the cost of sanity or the senses. The scrolls are essentially one example, because there are others we'll look at later, of something that could be compared to Tamriel's Necromonicon, ultimate knowledge that mortals aren't meant to possess without suffering. Lovecraft loved this trope. Recall how the Necromonicon's readers often ended up insane, and in Tamriel the Elder Scrolls fit that role perfectly. And speaking of forbidden lore, there's an even more esoteric concept known as Chim. In simple terms, Chim is said to be the secret knowledge of reality's true nature. Attaining Chim means realizing the world is an illusion, a dream, and that you are part of the dream, but maintaining your individuality regardless. Achieve it and you gain godlike power over the dream. Fail and you zero sum, which is to cease to exist entirely. I should note here, again, the idea of Chim is based on Michael Kirkbride's writings, which are not strictly official lore. However, they are generally accepted as part of the wider esoteric lore of the series. Anyway, it's hard to get more cosmically horrifying than the idea of Chim. The truth of the universe will annihilate all but the strongest wills. Vivek is heavily implied to have attained Chim, and the tribunal temple texts metaphysically hint at how perilous the process was, if indeed it was Chim they were referring to. This idea that simply comprehending reality can destroy you is pure cosmic horror. It echoes Lovecraft's theme that human minds are fragile in the face of cosmic truth. We're reminded of characters in Lovecraft who glimpse the cosmos's true scale or nature and are driven insane. As we touched upon earlier, in Elder Scrolls it goes beyond just insanity. Kirkbride theorised that a mortal who perceives the Godhead's dream without the mantle of a god will literally vanish. So the line between enlightenment and oblivion is razor thin, a terrific existential horror built into the metaphysics of this fictional universe. But what happens to those who go one step further? This is the implication of the Amaranth. In essence, Amaranth is the state of achieving a new reality by becoming the new dreamer. The Elder Scrolls cosmology hints that all existence is the dream of an ineffable being called the Godhead, a being so distant and mad it isn't even aware of the dreaming. Every character, every realm, mundus, oblivion, etc. is part of this overarching dream. Rare mortals, like those we've discussed, who attain enlightenment through mystical paths like Chim, become lucid in the dream but do not wake up. Amaranth is one step beyond even that. It's when a person does metaphorically wake up from the current dream and in doing so becomes a godhead of their own, dreaming a new reality. In Kirkbride's metaphor, the waking world is the dream of the Godhead. To achieve Amaranth is to mantle the Godhead and begin a new dream. So what does this mean for Tamriel? Potentially, that someone within the Elder Scrolls universe could, by obscure means, walk away from it, taking all of reality with them. The text often cited is the love letter from the 5th era, where the writer talks about love being the key to creating a new reality. It's arcane and poetic, but the upshot is both beautiful and horrifying. Our world exists because some other being is dreaming it, and one of us could do the same. In cosmic horror terms, it's almost like the idea of ascending to godhood but also obliterating the old universe in the process. The current universe would effectively be abandoned by its dreamer, who goes off to dream a new one, possibly ceasing to exist or becoming an unanchored husk. Amaranth is largely an esoteric topic among lore scholars, not something the average NPC in Skyrim is discussing at the tavern. But the implications are enormous. If realised, it would be the ultimate apocalyptic event, or perhaps transcendence is a better word. The very fabric of everything would be unwoven not by an external threat like Daedra, but by an act of internal apotheosis. You could spin up a horror story where a mortal pursues this goal and reality around them starts to unravel as they come closer to walking away into a new dream. In fact, some theorise that Amaranth has already happened at least once, that our current universe might be the dream born from a prior one achieving Amaranth. This is where Elder Scrolls lore edges into truly mind-bending, fourth-wall-breaking territory. From a first-person perspective as the writer of this journey, I'll admit, the Amaranth idea makes my head spin. It means any cosmic terror or world-devouring dragon we face is still operating safely inside the dream. The only thing outside it is this unreachable, perhaps unintentionally malevolent dreamer. And the only escape from the dream is for one of us to take its place, which is a process that by definition our currently dreaming minds can barely comprehend. If Lovecraft posited an uncaring universe where humans don't matter, Amaranth posits an infinitely mutable universe where reality doesn't matter. It can be rewritten or discarded if someone figures out how. That existential uncertainty, the sense that all of this could dissolve if the dreamer even blinks, is perhaps the deepest cosmic horror in the Elder Scrolls. We're going to take a look at another of the most quietly horrifying concepts in the Elder Scrolls mythos, the Towers. To most people in universe, these towers are just ancient ruins or fortresses, or even natural formations like mountains, but in deeper lore they are something else entirely, structural supports for reality itself. Early sources, notably the Tower and the Numantia Intercept, which are Michael Kirkbride developer texts, describe the towers as stabilising constructs created in the Dawn era to keep Mundus, the mortal world, from collapsing back into the formless chaos of Oblivion. Each tower has a stone, an artifact or source of power that acts as its metaphysical heart. Without its stone, a tower becomes inert, weakening the lattice that holds the mortal world together. Some examples of these towers and their stones include Adamantia, Adamantine or Doreni Tower on Balfiera Island, the primordial Ur Tower whose stone is the mysterious Zero Stone. Then there's Red Tower, Red Mountain in Morrowind, with the Heart of Lorkhan as its stone. Next we have the White Gold Tower, the Imperial City in Cyrodiil, with the Chim El Adabal, the central gem of the Amulet of Kings, as its stone. Then there's Green Sap, the Bosmeri Grat Oak forests of Valenwood, according to Bosmeri myths, grown from the perchance acorn, and the acorn is the tower's stone. And finally we have Snowthroat, the throat of the world in Skyrim, whose true stone remains debated. Michael Kirkbride's texts suggest it may be an enigmatic cave within the mountain's peak. Its apex is said to be only half here. As mentioned earlier, according to some traditions, the towers strengthen and reinforce the structures of Mundus, essentially shaping and stabilising reality. In this theory, they were established as a response to Lorkhan's Great Deception, an attempt by the Aedra, the divine spirits, to anchor the world after being tricked into creating it. In the Dawn-era mythos, Lorkhan convinced or tricked the other Aeda into forming the mortal plane, which left many of the gods diminished or gone and the world itself highly unstable. The first tower, Adamantia, was erected during the convention as the Aedra gathered to deal with Lorkhan's betrayal. After Lorkhan was defeated, the Aedra departed Mundus to save it from their overwhelming presence, leaving behind the towers as stabilising pylons to keep reality from unravelling. In a cosmic horror reading, the towers can be seen as the Aedra's panicked attempt to prop up a reality they never fully intended to create. Mundus is, in effect, a compromised structure, a half-finished world held upright by a handful of mythic pillars that grow weaker as the eras progress. What's particularly unsettling is that several of the towers have already fallen or become defunct. Red Mountain Stone, the Heart of Lorkhan, was freed in 3rd Era year 427 when the Nerevarine destroyed Cagnarak's bindings. The White Gold Tower Stone, the Amulet of Kings, on the other hand, was destroyed during Martin Septim's sacrifice at the end of the Oblivion Crisis in 3rd Era year 433. Other towers, such as Orichalk, the rumoured Yokudan Tower, and Walkbrass, the Brass Tower, i.e. the Numidium, exist only in scattered myth or shattered remnants. Orichalk was said to have sunk with the lost continent of Yokuda, and the Numidium was ultimately erased or altered after its short-lived activations. Each collapse or deactivation renders the tower inert and theoretically weakens the metaphysical integrity of the world, implying that the mortal plane is gradually becoming less real. Indeed, some scholars theorise that if enough tower stones are removed or fail, creation could unravel and Mundus might dissolve back into oblivion. This, again, is where the cosmic horror creeps in. If the towers were built to prevent Mundus from dissolving into the void, then their failure carries an implication more terrifying than any Daedric invasion or apocalypse. The end of the world not by fire or war, but by structural failure. The very fabric of reality could simply stop holding together. Time, space, and identity would erode like sand as the world quietly loses cohesion. In this light, the Thalmor's alleged plan to unmake Mundus, as hinted in the Numantia Intercept, where they speak of ending the prison of existence, becomes even more disturbing. The Thalmor are not merely trying to conquer Tamriel. According to this interpretation, they are attempting to switch off the supports of reality itself, undoing the towers in order to return all mortal souls to the infinite freedom of Aetherius. In other words, their end goal would be the wholesale dismantling of the world's architectural underpinnings, freeing them from what they see as the illusion or prison of the Mundus. From a Lovecraftian perspective, the towers make it clear that existence in the Elder Scrolls is held together by only a few arcane pylons, conceived by godlike beings who never intended for mortals to thrive in this realm. The implication is that the mortal plane is temporary, jury-rigged, and fundamentally unstable. Mundus persists only because a few ancient mytho-architectural devices continue to hum with stolen or repurposed divine power. For example, as mentioned, the Heart of Lorkhan's divine essence or Chim El Adabal's draconic blood. And so, as more stones fail, the universe frays, not with a cataclysmic bang, but through a quiet, creeping ontological decay. So, before history even truly began then, Tamriel was already awash in cosmic dread. Mortals live in a world that was forged from divine deceit and violence, built on the bones and organs of dead gods. The moon is a corpse, the landscape littered with hidden artifacts of unspeakable power, and reality itself is a fragile dream that the unenlightened must never fully comprehend. In a sense, every soul in Tamriel lives under the shadow of these truths without knowing it. The oldest tales set the stage. The Elder Scrolls universe is fundamentally one where cosmic forces are indifferent to mortals, and to discover their secrets is to court madness or destruction. And if all we've talked about so far isn't Lovecraftian enough for you, fear not, because our journey is just beginning. As the first era opens, we immediately encounter a mysterious event that feels like a cosmic horror story: the disappearance of the Dwemer. The Dwemer, or dwarves, were an advanced civilization of skeptics and scientists in the Merethic and early First Era. They delved into the heart of Lorkhan itself, seeking to harness its power. In First Era, year 700, at the Battle of Red Mountain, the entire Dwemer race vanished in an instant. Literally gone from the world in a heartbeat, right as their chief tonal architect Kagranak activated tools on Lorkhan's heart. One moment they stood among Chimer and Nords on the battlefield, the next, empty armour clattering to the ground. Tamriel's historians still cannot definitively explain what happened. This mass disappearance is one of the great unsolved mysteries of Elder Scrolls lore, and it carries a distinctly Lovecraftian vibe. An entire race meddled with powers beyond mortal ken and paid the price by being erased from existence. Exploring a Dwemer ruin in Morrowind or Skyrim, you can't help feeling uneasy. The machines still hum and skitter, their creators long gone. As one commentator put it, these ruins, with their cold, alien machinery and the deliberate absence of answers, evoke a slight feeling of Lovecraftian cosmic horror. The Dwemer tinkered with the fundamental forces of the world, and in so doing they transcended or were annihilated, maybe both. The player never fully understands the Dwemer's fate, and neither do the characters. It's deliberately mysterious. That unknown quality is key to cosmic horror. Just as Lovecraft might have a lost civilization wiped out by contacting some elder terror, here we have a proud civilization undone by hubris and a cosmic artifact. Fan theories abound, of course. Some speculate the Dwemer unbound themselves from reality, merging with the Numidium, a brass god they were building, or scattered across the multiverse. Others liken Kagnarak's fatal moment to Lovecraft's scientists, whose experiments backfire horribly. In Lovecraft's From Beyond, for instance, a device meant to expand perception opens its inventors to monsters from another dimension. They vanish or die gruesomely. Likewise, Kagnarak's tools might have expanded the Dwemer right out of existence, or invited something that devoured them. It's chilling precisely because we don't know. All that's left are their haunted halls and lethal machines still dutifully guarding empty cities. To the people of the First Era, this event must have been terrifying. Imagine being a Chimer or Nord soldier at Red Mountain witnessing an entire race blip out. The Dwemer's allies and enemies alike would be shaken for generations. Here, the Elder Scrolls delivers that Lovecraftian payoff. The first time you encounter an abandoned Dwemer ruin, you ask, what happened here? And the answer, that something beyond comprehension occurred, whispers at you from the shadows. In a game experience that's mostly heroic fantasy, this sort of moment is a reminder to the player that there are forces in Tamrielic history that defy explanation, much like the unexplainable events in Lovecraft's mythos. On a more concrete note, another First Era cosmic horror nugget involves what happened after the Dwemer vanished. The heart of Lorkhan, freed from the Dwemer control, was eventually found by the Chimer hero Nerevar and his companions, who would become the Tribunal Gods. They decided to keep it secret and untapped, swearing an oath never to use it in the profane way the Dwemer did. But the heart was still active, pulsating in the depths of Red Mountain all through late First Era and beyond. By the time the Tribunal tried to use it to become living gods themselves in the early Second Era, a dark presence had already formed around it, the malevolent divine spark that would later empower Dagoth Ur, and we'll get to him in more detail later on. So here's a dead god's heart acting like a cursed relic. Anyone who touches it ignites events they can't control. This has shades of Lovecraft's The Colour Out of Space, where an alien meteorite silently poisons the land and people around it. The heart, an artifact literally not of this world, warped existence around it in subtle ways. The Tribunal initially used it for benevolent godhood, but it ultimately corrupted one of their own, Almalexia, and enabled a cosmic level threat in Dagoth Ur. We will look into this in more detail later, but anyway, as we can see once again, messing with a cosmic artifact leads to horror. Before we leave the First Era, let's touch on a lesser known but telling incident, the early myths surrounding Namira's artifact, the Dark Heart. Legends preserved by the Reach folk and Khajiit and echoed in still older stories speak of a relic called the Dark Heart of Lork. Sound familiar? These tales suggest that after Lorkhan's real heart was torn out, a darkness associated with him and with Namira remained in the world. The frightful heart, a warped remnant of the void. Some First Era peoples would have heard whispers of this thing, a piece of primal darkness tied to both Lork and Namira. If true, it means even in the First Era people were stumbling on remnants of dead gods that linked to the void of Namira. The Reachmen say after Lorkhan's real heart was torn out, this false dark heart was also left behind, eventually winding up in Blackreach deep beneath Skyrim. That artifact would stay hidden for millennia, but keep it in mind because it resurfaces in our story during the Second Era. Even as early as the First Era though, knowledge of such a thing must have been terrifying. A sphere of eternal darkness that consumes souls and whispers in one's mind? It sounds like it was ripped from Lovecraft's notebook. Think of the shining trapezohedron in Lovecraft's The Haunter of the Dark. A mysterious crystal that summons an avatar of darkness. The Dark Heart could be seen as Tamriel's equivalent, a void crystal that hungers. As mentioned, we're going to look more into this later, but for now, in the First Era, it's mostly rumour. But cosmic horror often starts as half-forgotten rumour, doesn't it? As the First Era closes, the vibe of cosmic horror is cemented even more. A vanished race and scattered scraps of dangerous knowledge and artifacts remain, beckoning the curious and the unwary. Tamriel's earliest civilized people already grappled with existential dread whether they realised it or not. The Dwemer delved literally too deep, and their fate stands as a warning. Meanwhile, whispers of dead gods' hearts and darkness artifacts lurk in old songs. Little do the people of Tamriel suspect how these seeds of cosmic horror will sprout in later eras. The Second Era is a time of turmoil, the interregnum with no central empire and lots of dark corners for cosmic weirdness to fester. And fester it does. This era is when the Elder Scrolls Online is set, and it gives us a treasure trove of Lovecraftian flavoured tales. Imagine cultists in forgotten caves, ancient void artifacts awakening, and even the realms of Oblivion themselves taking on a cosmic horror sheen. Let's break down a few key events and encounters chronologically, all roughly in the same few years of the late Second Era. First, remember that Dark Heart of Lorkhan we mentioned earlier? It finally resurfaces in year 582 of the Second Era deep beneath Skyrim. In the Dark Heart of Skyrim storyline, the ancient Night Hollow vampires and the Grey Host, led by Rada al-Saran and aided by Lady Boleyn, work to awaken the Dark Heart in the depths of Blackreach, beneath the Reach, while Ard Kadok rules uneasily above in Markarth. For ages, it just sat there, pulsing quietly in a silent chamber. The Reach folk revered it as a pathway to the void, a source of primal namiric power. When unwitting souls wander near it, they hear intrusive whispers and feel its throbbing beat in their bones. According to Reach prophecies and cult practice, the slumbering Dark Heart can be awakened by feeding on souls, and death is the greatest gift to Namira. Some clans treated it as a power to be fed and drawn upon. The Night Hollow clan of vampires, for example, drew on it, and it turned their eyes black with a swirling void ichor. When the Dark Heart is reawakened, its power nearly fuels an apocalyptic void-charged storm. Rada al-Saran, the Yokudan sword saint turned vampire lord and leader of the Grey Host, uses it through the orrery of Arkthazand to power the Darkstorm, a ritual that would have consumed the souls of everyone in the Reach and anchored them in its sanctuary realm of Greyhaven, a piece of land sundered from the Reach, caught in the void between Mundus and Oblivion. The visuals are spine-chilling, a sphere of pure darkness surrounded by a corona of turquoise light, beating like a huge black heart. The heroes, the Vestige, the player character, and their allies in House Ravenwatch, a noble order of benevolent vampires, manage to thwart the plot, but not before witnessing shades and nameless things crawling forth from that darkness, and watching the Dark Heart drag the souls of Markarth's people towards itself. In one climactic scene, Lady Boleyn, the ancient Night Hollow vampire queen posing as advisor to Ard Kadak, bathes in the Dark Heart's energy in the Arcthazand orrery, while Void Mothers, Reachfolk women transformed by Nemiric void magic, feed the heart, and Namira herself intervenes through Arana, a former Ghost Song clan hunter who broke from her Namira worshipping tribe, empowering her to fight on despite mortal wounds. As an aside, Khajiit myth speaks of the dark behind the world, an ever-hungry darkness that Namira and her Dromathra servants, Khajiit corrupted by the void, dance in to the drumming of the Dark Heart of Lorkhaj. And that aside is relevant because during the Dark Heart's peak in the Reach, it feels as though you can hear that same dark behind the world. A heartbeat that is not Lorkhan's, not Namira's, but something in between. It's cosmic horror gold, an ancient evil artifact that literally blurs the line between life and the infinite void, nearly turning a whole region into a nightmarish realm of shades. If Lovecraft wrote high fantasy, he'd approve of this plot. It has shades of the Dunwich horror, an evil presence feeding on sacrifices. Moving on to another Second Era tale, Cultists and Forbidden Books. The late Second Era is rife with cult activity. The chaos of the interregnum lets strange faiths thrive. In one example, the region of Stormhaven, High Rock, sees a horrible nightmare plague orchestrated by a Daedric prince, Vermina. King Emeric of Wayrest is trapped in Emeric's Dream, a nightmare realm in Quagmire by Vermina and the Night Terror during the quest Vermina's Gambit. While this is more traditional dream weaving, it's still tinged with cosmic horror. Vermina's plane Quagmire is a shifting nightmare realm where reality melts like wax. One could compare it to Lovecraft's Dreamlands stories or The Nightmare Lake, a place where dreams become real and can kill you. The idea of being afflicted by nightmares due to Daedric influence has that folk horror vibe Lovecraft often used, an unseen force warping the minds of an entire community. Moving on, let's talk forbidden texts, since Lovecraft loved a good cursed book. In Tamriel, one of the most notorious is Ingasta Kavata Kavakis, a necromantic tome written by the slow necromancer Ingasta in the late Second Era. Ingasta resided on Stros Mackay around year 864 of the Second Era during the events of the Elder Scrolls adventures Redguard. His book, written in the squishy, slowed tongue, is so arcane that most of it just appears as gibberish letters to the reader. If you're a Lovecraft fan, that might sound familiar. In his lore, the Necronomicon is often said to drive readers insane or be written in indecipherable languages. Ingasta Kavata Kavakis plays a similar role, a sinister grimoire you actually encounter in-game. It appears in Morrowind, Oblivion and Skyrim as an Easter egg book. And, fun fact, in Oblivion's Shadow over Hackdirt quest, the in-game book Bible of the Deep Ones, which I'll discuss more in a bit, is filled with text that's actually taken from Ingasta Kavata Kavakis. It seems the developers cheekily copied and pasted Ingasta's weird writings as the cult's Bible. It's a meta-connection, but we can imagine in-universe that maybe the Hackdirt cultists found an old alien scripture and used it for their Deep Ones worship. Either way, we have a literal forbidden book tying together Elder Scrolls cosmic horror threads. The Second Era also gives us an absolute gift of Lovecraftian homage. Hermaeus Mora's Plane of Apocrypha and the events of the Necrom chapter. While players first saw Apocrypha later in Skyrim's Fourth Era, it actually exists timelessly, and in the Second Era we have a major crisis involving it. The Daedric prince Hermaeus Mora, also known as the Woodland Man to ancient Nords, the One Who Knows, and the Demon of Knowledge, is basically the Lovecraftian figure of Elder Scrolls. As one writer aptly put it, all Daedric princes are outside the laws of reality and often indifferent to mortals, but none are quite as Lovecraftian as Hermaeus Mora. He appears usually as a shambling mass of eyes and tentacles. a formless shape strongly resembling Lovecraft's Great Old Ones. In fact, Mora's appearance and behaviour mirror Lovecraft's Yog-Sothoth, an omniscient, tentacled cosmic entity, and Shoggoth's shape-shifting masses, and he is explicitly as Lovecraftian an entity as they come. The H.P. Lovecraft Wiki even notes that Mora's formless body and infinite knowledge recall those of Lovecraft's monsters. So it's no surprise that when Apocrypha Mora's realm becomes a setting, it is dripping with cosmic horror aesthetic. In Elder Scrolls Online Necrom, we travel to Apocrypha to aid Hermaeus Mora in a crisis. The developers literally described this storyline as cosmic horror. Why? Well, Apocrypha is an infinite library of forbidden knowledge, endless seas of black ink and roiling tentacles with towering piles of books lit by eerie glow. It's described in-game as an endless library where all forbidden knowledge can be found. People who spend too long there lose themselves. In Skyrim, there's lore that reading Mora's black books can ensnare your soul forever. In Necrom's story, a secret hidden in Apocrypha has been stolen by a cult, and if that knowledge is revealed, it could unravel all of reality. Yes, the stakes are that high, a knowledge so dangerous it can unmake the cosmos. Lovecraft would love that plot. It's essentially the climax of many of his works. Stop the cultists before they summon or trigger the end of the world. The questline has you work alongside Mora's watchlings and a mortal apprentice to contain this breach. As you do, you wander Apocrypha's surreal landscape. Literally mountains of books, the entire place has been lovingly crafted to feel like a Lovecraftian nightmare. One gaming magazine said, the unceasing madness of the Elder Scrolls Apocrypha is dripping in cosmic horror. And they are right. You fight seekers, floating many-eyed spellcasting horrors that look like flying Cthulhoid brains, and lurkers, hulking amphibious monstrosities that rise from the ink pools. A Goomba Stomp article wonderfully notes, these volumes contain all knowledge there is to learn, and are guarded by Cthulhu-faced seekers and fish-like lurkers. Incomprehensible realms accessed through dreams and arcane tomes are deeply rooted in the Lovecraft mythos, as is the concept that knowledge not meant to be known begets madness, and Hermaeus Mora is a perfect example. Couldn't have said it better myself. In the Necrom story, we even return to the city of Necrom in Tamriel, an ancient dark elf city devoted to mortuary rites. The very name Necrom, built on the old Necro root, is spooky. This chapter ties together multiple cosmic horror threads. The mortal side shows a secretive hidden cult, the hidden kindred manipulating minds in Necrom, while the planar side has the Apocrypha itself under assault. During the quests, we get scenes of mortals driven to madness by glimpses of Apocrypha's secrets. A very Lovecraftian fate. Think of The Whisperer in Darkness, where a scholar gets compromised by the alien Mygo after seeking forbidden knowledge. The storyline even has a moment where you have to deliberately forget the dangerous secret to keep reality safe, essentially sacrificing knowledge to stop the madness. That thematic element, erasing knowledge for the greater good, resonates with Lovecraft's idea that sometimes ignorance is truly bliss. Mora himself, despite his monstrous appearance, is almost a neutral entity here, desperate to keep this secret buried so that existence continues. Despite Mora's Cthulhu-esque appearance, the Daedric Prince is neither good nor evil, notes one GameSpot preview, and will recruit players to help protect a deep dark secret that, if discovered by the wrong people, could unravel all of reality. When playing through it, I couldn't help but feel I was acting out a cosmic horror pulp story in the best way, racing against lunatic cultists to prevent the apocalypse via forbidden lore. Now, I mentioned earlier that we were going to have a look at the Hist more deeply, so let's do that now. In the swamps of Blackmarsh thrives one of the strangest entities in the Elder Scrolls lore, the Hist. Neither singular nor plural exactly, the Hist are a species of gargantuan spore trees ancient beyond reckoning. They exhibit a group consciousness that spans across roots. Every Hist tree is connected at the root of one mind, such that in essence the entire vast forest of Hist is like a single distributed intelligence. Here we have a concept straight from cosmic horror, an alien hive mind flourishing quietly in the background of history, watching eras come and go. The Argonians revere the Hist as gods or elders, but even they don't fully understand them, can't understand them. One Argonian elder says communing with the Hist is to see, hear, smell, feel, and even taste in a way not your own, and that the Hist's wisdom is infinite but incomprehensible to mortals. Those words could describe interaction with Lovecraft's great old ones just as well. The Argonians believe that their very souls come from the Hist. When an Argonian egg hatches, a Hist tree nearby imparts a drop of its sap, which becomes the creature's blood and spirit. In other words, the Argonians are, in a sense, walking extensions of the Hist. This is a rich and unsettling idea, a playable race in the game who might just be meat puppets for an elder flora. It's reminiscent of science fiction horror like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, except here the body snatching happened at birth and is culturally accepted. Argonians themselves don't see it negatively, it's simply their nature. But from an outside perspective, the entire Argonian civilization is the way it is because an alien plant species programs it. This calls to mind Lovecraft's The Shadow Out of Time, where a hive-minded race, the Great Race of Yith, swaps minds with humans across time. Some fans have indeed drawn parallels. The Hist sending visions and manipulating Argonian souls across eras does sound a bit like the Yithians' MO. While there's no direct lore text confirming intertime mind swaps, the Hist are explicitly said to communicate through shared dreams and trances. There are suggestions that they exist partly outside linear time, having witnessed the dawn of the world and likely are planning for its dusk. Throughout Tamriel's history, whenever the Hist are involved, the results can be eerie. During the Second Era, an event known as the Khanatan Flu devastated Tamriel. There are theories that the Hist were deliberately used by an Argonian shaman to create and unleash this deadly plague to punish outsiders and protect Argonia. Is it possible that the Hist knowingly colluded with this scheme? Think about that, a sentient grove of trees concocting a supervirus in their sap, quietly spreading it beyond their borders and sitting in ancient silence as millions of humans and elves cough their last. It's almost plausible scientifically, spores, disease vectors, yet unnervingly intentional. Argonians remained largely immune, fueling the suspicion. This is biological warfare on a cosmic scale. Similarly to other entries we've looked at, it's not entirely unlike Lovecraft's The Colour Out of Space, where an alien vegetation slowly poisons a farm. Later in the Second Era, we see more direct Hist meddling. One involves a history that shows an Argonian heroine prophetic visions of a coming invasion, pushing her to rally her people just in time. In another instance, a tribe called the Zit-Zat fell under the influence of a mad Hist and built a grotesque city called Mazatun, the Puzzle City, full of impossible architecture and torture chambers. That Hist's influence drove them to enslave other Argonians and perform bizarre rituals, essentially a cult under the sway of a corrupt tree. The Mazatun Hist eventually had to be put out of action as it had become a malign intelligence, steering its tribe towards heinous acts. The idea of a mad tree turning an entire village into homicidal maniacs could be the plot of a pulp horror novella. It's very much the influence of an alien mind corrupting simpler beings. And crucially, Argonians under these influences don't even realise it. To them, listening to the Hist is as natural as prayer. This raises the unsettling question: how much free will do Argonians truly have? By design, the Hist straddle a fine line between benevolent guardians and potential alien overlords. On one hand, some sources indicate the Hist called their people home and primed them for the Oblivion crisis, and the Argonian tradition holds that they achieved remarkable success. On the other hand, their motivations can be utterly opaque. They do not explain themselves to mortals. Argonian shamans called tree minders often ingest large quantities of Hist sap to commune with the trees, a dangerous practice that can cause unwanted hallucinations and physical mutations like scale growths. Picture a lizard priest writhing in trance, golden sap drooling from his jaws as he tries to interpret the flood of otherworldly sensations. That's basically an Argonian communion. It's as eerie as any Lovecraft cult ceremony minus overt blood rituals, though those exist too in some tribes. There's even a legend that one Hist didn't like its tribe's path. The Hist of the city Lilmoth supposedly went rogue and was later killed for summoning the floating island of Umbriel, detailed in the Infernal City novel. That episode is pure sci-fantasy, but it emphasises that Hist operate on a scale beyond human politics. They might bargain with Daedric princes, Molag Bal in one case, to protect a tribe by hiding it in Cold Harbour, if it serves their mysterious ends. To Tamriel's humans and elves, the Hist remain an enigma. Few outside Black Marsh even realise the swamp trees are alive, let alone telepathic geniuses. But the Argonians know, and some scholars in the Mages Guild have started to figure it out too. One can imagine a future Imperial cartographer venturing into the deep swamp, stumbling on an ancient Hist grove, and realising he's in the presence of a pan-temporal supermind older than civilization. That revelation is the essence of cosmic horror in Elder Scrolls, discovering that an alien collective has been here all along, quietly puppeteering an entire race for millennia. Yet, to the Argonians, that collective is mother, father, and god in one. It's truly an alien way of life. Lovecraft often wrote about great old ones who are worshipped by locals without fully understanding what they are. The Argonians and the Hist reflect that trope in a rare positive light. The Hist generally want their children to thrive, albeit on their terms. There's even a fan theory, half tongue-in-cheek, that the entire Elder Scrolls story is actually the Hist's dream. That this plant mind is the one reading the metaphorical Elder Scroll, since who else lives long enough? No textual evidence for that, of course, but it shows how the community gravitates to viewing the Hist as a layer of unknowable truth in the world. In gameplay, the Argonians' racial abilities like Hist skin regenerations and their shadow skills born under the sign of the Shadow, supposedly tied to Sithis via the Hist, all add to the mystique. Argonians literally change gender in certain seasons at the Hist's behest, showing that even personal identity is subject to the tree's whim. The brilliance of the Hist in the Elder Scrolls' cosmic horror undercurrent is that they invert the usual dynamic. Instead of a cosmic entity coming from beyond to terrorise mortals, these ones have been here since the start, subtly steering one people's fate. They are part of the natural order, but only because they decided to be. Should the Hist ever collectively decide the rest of Tamriel is a threat, one shudders to think what plagues or plots they might spawn next. Or perhaps an even scarier thought, what if the Hist simply decide to leave? Without the Hist, Argonians lose their souls, literally their cohesion and will. An entire intelligent species would become hollow, directionless husks. For the Argonians, the end of the world might come not through fire or invasion, but through the quiet withdrawal of alien affection. In the void left behind, how would the Argonians fare? It's a chilling hypothetical that really highlights the dependent, precarious bond between mortal and cosmic patron. In sum, the Hist exemplify the quietly terrifying idea of alien overlords we can never truly comprehend, yet cannot live without. So, wrapping up the Second Era, I would say the most interesting to me are the big ones we discussed, the Dark Heart in Skyrim's Depths and the Hermaeus Mora Apocrypha Crisis. They show the two sides of cosmic horror, one primal and wordless, the beating void heart in the earth, and one intellectual and arcane, the forbidden knowledge realm in Oblivion. Both demonstrate that even in an era of knights and sorcerers, some threats are existential, attacking the soul, the mind, or reality itself. As the Second Era draws to a close with Tiber Septim eventually uniting the continent, these cosmic undercurrents remain largely hidden from the history books. The common folk might never know how close they came to the void swallowing Skyrim, or the fabric of the world threatening to rip apart. But we know, and these tales get passed down in obscure lore ready to bubble up later. It's time now to step into the Third Era, where some of these ancient horrors resurface, and where new ones emerge, sometimes right under the hero of Kvatch's or the Neverarine's nose. And here is where a few of the most direct Lovecraft homages occur, so it's really interesting to look at. The third era is dominated by the Septim Empire and classic high fantasy storylines, the return of a dragonborn emperor, the invasion of Oblivion, etc. Yet, even amid those heroic narratives, cosmic horror seeps in through the cracks. In Morrowind and Oblivion, Bethesda placed some of the most blatant Lovecraft references and themes, while also continuing the deeper lore's thread of metaphysical dread. In Morrowind, the main plot has you, the Nerevarine, unravelling the mystery of the Sixth House cult and confronting the demigod Dagoth Ur. On the surface, it's a story of a lost great house and a vengeful god. But it is absolutely drenched in cosmic horror atmosphere. Dagoth Ur is essentially a sleeping god beneath Red Mountain who whispers into the dreams of susceptible mortals, slowly building a cult of mindless servants. Sound familiar? It's essentially the plot of Lovecraft's The Call of Cthulhu. In that story, a slumbering Old One, Cthulhu, sends out psychic dreams to sensitive individuals, spawning doomsday cults around the world awaiting his awakening. In Morrowind, for years before your arrival, people all across Vardenfell, particularly dissidents, the deceased, and the disillusioned, have been experiencing strange dreams. They hear the call of Lord Dagoth inviting them to come to Red Mountain. These dreamers become sleepers, leaving their homes to join Dagoth Ur's cult. By the time the game starts, there are hidden 6th House bases in caves and lost Dwemer ruins filled with once normal people who now wander around in a dreamlike daze, mumbling Dagoth Ur's mantra. Walk into one of these lairs and you'll find shrines made of corpus flesh and ash adorned with candles and eerie totems. Deformed monsters called Ascended Sleepers, humanoids mutated into tentacled beasts, float towards you. The music and atmosphere in these 6th House areas is all straight up horror. It's easily the most unsettling content in any mainline Elder Scrolls game. Lovecraft comparisons are unavoidable. Dagoth Ur himself, when you finally meet him, is calm, charismatic, and utterly insane. He's been living under Red Mountain for centuries, communing with the heart of a god, Lorkhan's heart, and gaining power and knowledge far beyond mortal limits, and it's cracked his mind. He greets you as old friend, thinking you're the reincarnation of Nerevar, offers you dominion in his new world order. There's a vibe of join me in enlightenment that a cosmic entity might extend to a mere human. This echoes many Lovecraft cult leaders like the Whisperer in Darkness, where the alien-influenced mastermind tries to recruit the protagonist into having his brain placed in a machine to travel the cosmos. Dagoth Ur's grand plan is to use the heart's power to spread a divine blight and turn all of Tamriel into his domain, united in Corpus, the disease he manages, and in worship of him. It goes beyond conquest, it's a perverse transformation of society driven by an otherworldly force. The tools are supernatural disease, dream manipulation, and arcane technology, the Akulakan Second Numidium. Morrowind deftly mixes classic fantasy prophecy with some really creepy horror motifs. So let's spotlight a few especially Lovecraftian elements in the 6th House storyline. First off, we could look at the corpus disease itself. This is Dagoth Ur's signature curse, a disease that grants immortality but deformity and madness as well. Those afflicted eventually turn into twisted, gibbering corpus beasts, or lame corpus. Basically zombie-like monsters except still alive and in eternal pain. One might recall Lovecraft's The Outsider or Cool Air for unnaturally prolonged life as a curse. But Corpus reminds me more of the Innsmouth look, people transforming into something inhuman due to an eldritch taint. In Innsmouth it was a fish god hybridization. In Morrowind it's a divine disease. The Corpusarium, a place where incurables are sequestered, is as grim and tragic as any Lovecraft asylum of unstable Shoggoth victims. And then there's dream sending. Dagoth Ur invading people's dreams is textbook Lovecraft. Numerous dreamers will randomly blurt out quotes about the dream connection with him. Even your player character experiences these dream visions after certain story milestones. As mentioned earlier, this recalls the portion of Call of Cthulhu where sensitive artists start sculpting monstrous figures in their sleep, driven by Cthulhu's call. Lore enthusiasts have explicitly pointed out this parallel, that Dagoth Ur's dream communication is very much like Lovecraft's dreaming cults. And when you finally confront Dagoth Ur in the heart of Red Mountain, he's not a mindless beast or just a raving lunatic, he's eerily friendly and eloquent. To me, there's almost a sadness to him, but also a palpable otherness. It's like you're speaking to something that wears a man's face, in this case literally a golden mask, but is no longer a man. Lovecraft liked that kind of scenario, the deceptively calm final confrontation with an inhuman intelligence. In Dagoth's case, he's so corrupted by the heart's power that he refers to himself in plural at times, or speaks as if he's dreaming and can't quite tell if you're real or not. Polite, ominous, and utterly alien in ambition, Dagoth Ur could be a character in a Lovecraft novella if you transplanted him to 1920s New England. What I love is that Morrowind never explicitly says this is cosmic horror. It's just there in the subtext and tone. You can play the game as a straight hero's journey, but if you pay attention, the Sixth House storyline is as much horror as fantasy. Fans on forums have often remarked how unsettling the Sixth House quests are. Some even say they felt like they were in a different genre suddenly. One fan on Reddit wrote, "Even though I've defeated Dagoth Ur, I'm still really unsettled by the Sixth House," highlighting the lasting creepy impression. The uncertain but certainly horrifying fate that would have befallen Morrowind and Tamriel had Dagoth succeeded is what truly cements it as cosmic horror. He would effectively remake life into an extension of himself, a nightmare hive mind under a mad god. It's a far cry from a typical villain wanting a throne. This is existential doom. We now come to perhaps the most on-the-nose Lovecraft reference in the entire Elder Scrolls franchise, Hackdirt. In Oblivion, there's a side quest literally titled A Shadow over Hackdirt, which any Lovecraft fan will recognise as a play on the Shadow over Innsmouth. This quest is a masterful homage, transplanting Lovecraft's infamous fish people cult story into Tamriel. It's so direct that it almost feels like a crossover episode, and it's brilliantly done. Here's the setup. An Argonian merchant's daughter, Darma, goes missing on a delivery run to a backwoods village called Hackdirt. You, the hero of Kvatch, go to this remote hamlet to investigate. When you arrive, Hackdirt is immediately sketchy. It's a tiny settlement deep in the woods with burned out buildings and sullen, hostile locals. They basically tell you to get lost. As you poke around, you find the missing girl's horse abandoned, a clear sign that something's wrong. Stay overnight and the townsfolk attack you in your sleep to drive you off or kill you. Eventually, you discover there's a whole underground cave system beneath Hackdirt where the townsfolk gather to worship bizarre entities they call the Deep Ones. They've imprisoned Darma as a sacrifice. You find a tattered tome in their chapel named the Bible of the Deep Ones. It's written in an unfamiliar language, Daedric script as it happens, filled with crazy ramblings. Just like how Lovecraft's cults would have their forbidden tomes, the esoteric order of Dagon in Innsmouth had shadowy records of their ceremonies. This is a straight parallel to Innsmouth. In Lovecraft's story, Innsmouth is a decrepit fishing town whose people worship the Deep Ones, aquatic eldritch beings, in exchange for prosperity, and have interbred with them, producing deformed fish-like offspring. In Hackdirt, we learn through clues and a dialogue with the one friendly citizen that years ago the Hackdirt people discovered creatures deep beneath their land. They began worshipping these Deep Ones for favour. At some point, the cult was shut down by outsiders. We hear that years back, the Imperial Legion torched Hackdirt and killed many townsfolk after discovering their dark practices. But apparently a few survivors kept the faith and waited. Now, by the time of Oblivion, they've secretly revived the cult and are trying to appease the Deep Ones with sacrifices. Hence poor Darma's predicament. It's almost a sequel to Innsmouth. What if Innsmouth had been raided by the feds, but decades later the survivors tried to start the cult again? Now, what exactly are Hackdirt's Deep Ones in Elder Scrolls lore? The game never shows them directly, which in a way is even more Lovecraftian. They remain unseen, presumably deep in flooded caverns, but clues suggest they might be some form of vicious dreg or slode or other subterranean beast. However, fans and developer nods pretty much say it's a Lovecraft Easter egg first and foremost. The exact nature of the creatures, of course, is left to our imagination, which is very effective for horror. Then there's the Hackdirt Bible, when translated from Daedric, seems gibberish, but it's actually a slightly changed version of Esperanto. From a gameplay perspective, exploring Hackdirt is a memorable, creepy detour in an otherwise heroic game. You've got the atmosphere of the actual village itself, and the lighting in Hackdirt Caverns is minimal. You need a torch to see the disturbing little shrine where they commune with the Deep Ones. And you find Dharma in a cell crying, grateful but terrified, which grounds the horror in emotion. She's an innocent who nearly got sacrificed to the Deep Ones. When you finally leave Hackdirt with her, the townsfolk glower, but their spirit is broken. Still, you never truly learn what slithers below. The threat of the Deep Ones remains lurking. Critics and fans love this quest because it's such an overt love letter to Lovecraft. As one gaming article noted, Lovecraft fans will immediately notice the similarities: the dilapidated town, pagan cult, fishy beings underground. And also, the quest doesn't explicitly tie into any wider plot. It's standalone, which in a way makes it even more effective, like a short horror story nestled in the greater epic. And thematically, it serves as a contrast to all the high fantasy heroics. In the shadows of this shining empire, there are still isolated pockets of utter darkness and insanity, where people forsake the nine divines to worship things that scuttle in lightless depths. The Dwemer relationship with their ancestors is another quiet thread that leans into cosmic horror when examined closely. In Morrowind's culture, the line between the living and the dead is unusually thin. The Dwemer people openly mingle with their ancestor spirits. They preserve ashes in family tombs, summon ghosts for counsel, and even bind spirits as guardians. Imagine growing up knowing grandmother's spectre might literally be watching from the rafters. For the Dark Elves, this is normal. Veloth's people built their entire identity around the dead. When the prophet Veloth led the Chimer out of Somerset, one of his core reforms was a return to ancestor worship and the old ways. He rejected the Altmer habit of leaving their forebears behind and taught that both ancestor spirits and Daedra should be treated as powerful forebears who could be bargained with and honoured. That idea runs straight through Chimer history into the Dwemer era. By the time of Morrowind, ancestor spirits are not a vague superstition but an active part of daily life. Dwemer believe their spirits persist after death, bound to their families, able to know and affect the future, work great magic and grant blessings, protection from hostile sorcery, and oracular insight that sometimes even gods lack. The relationship is intimate and serious. All that a Dwemer thinks and does is believed to be under the watchful eye of the family dead. In practical terms, this becomes a whole architecture of death. Before the Blight era, each family kept a household shrine, sometimes nothing more than a hearth, where relics were venerated. These shrines are sometimes called waiting doors, symbolising a door to oblivion. Ideally, the actual remains are sent to great necropolis, such as Necrom, the cities of the dead, or in some cases built into clan ghost fences. Low-level magical walls that draw on ancestral energy to shield a family's holdings. Ancestors may even ask for their remains to be used that way as a sign of honour and sacrifice. The spirits themselves can manifest physically to offer help or advice, retaining their magical expertise, but the lore is explicit that most hate doing so. When they manifest, they suffer something called the mortal chill, an experience so painful it often drives them mad. Those mad spirits are then deliberately employed by the Tribunal Temple as guards and servants, a sanctioned practice that sits in stark contrast to the Temple's condemnation of conventional necromancy. The Temple draws a very sharp line between what it calls spirit magic and necromancy. Both involve the dead, but spirit magic is framed as sacred and anchored in pacts with willing ancestors, while necromancy is condemned as impure. There are cultural double standards baked into this. Tilvani necromancy was historically tolerated so long as it did not target Dwemer, and bonewalkers and bone lords, undead created through temple ritual, are explicitly not classed as necromancy inside Morrowind. Both the Temple and the Ashlander tribes, though, share one moral boundary. Forcing the spirits of ancestors into service is considered shameful. Dragging a ghost out of its own world against its will is seen as enslaving it. And Dwemer sources describe even voluntary service as something that can be cruel to the spirit, tolerated only when done out of love and duty to family and people. All of that is the baseline. The ghost fence is where it becomes genuinely nightmarish. With the rise of Dagoth Ur and the Blight in the late Third Era, the Tribunal ordered a massive redirection of ancestor remains. Instead of going to family tombs or local ghost fences, the vast majority of Dwemer dead were now committed to the Great Ghost Fence around Red Mountain. Temple texts describe this quite plainly. Bones that once fortified clan shrines were diverted to the fence, and families were told their previous traditions were selfish. Local temples were given small portions of each person's remains, and clan worship was expected to shift to temple shrines instead. In effect, an enormous share of the nation's ancestral dead was rerouted away from private family structures and into a single, centralised barrier. Viewed coldly, the horror doesn't come from anything occult that isn't already in the lore. It comes from scale and intent. You have a culture where the dead are still present, still watching, still capable of intervention, and where manifesting into the mortal world is painful enough to drive spirits insane. Those same beliefs say that remains can be built into ghost fences and that mad spirits can be harnessed as guards. Then, in the Ghost Fence crisis, the Tribunal takes that whole apparatus and nationalises it. The bones and spirits that once protected individual lineages become components in a continent-shaping wall. Families lose direct custody of their dead, and the temple decides which slivers of remains they are allowed to keep. The sources don't say that the spirits inside the Ghost Fence are corrupted or twisted. That part is speculation, but even sticking strictly to canon, the image is stark. An entire people's honoured ancestors bound into a barrier at the edge of a volcanic wasteland, while mad spirits are deliberately deployed as tools. From a Lovecraftian angle, you don't need to invent anything to make this unsettling. The lore presents this as duty and sacrifice, a necessary response to Dagoth Ur, but the underlying logic is bleak. Even in death, you do not truly leave the system. Your soul remains bound to your family, your remains can be mortared into a wall, and your spirit might be summoned to endure the mortal chill again and again in the name of protecting the living. That tension between sincere reverence and the quiet brutality of how those spirits are used is where the ancestor cult brushes up against cosmic horror. By the late Third Era, Tamriel had seen portals to Oblivion ripped open and Daedra marching on cities. Yet the most disorienting revelation wasn't the demons, it was the nature of Oblivion itself. In the Elder Scrolls, Oblivion isn't just one place, but a multiverse of bizarre planes, each ruled by a Daedric prince and each defying mortal logic. The cosmos of Mundus, the mortal world, is essentially an island floating in a sea of oblivion, surrounded by the twinkling gaps of stars where Aetherius shines through. This means when you gaze at the night sky in Tamriel, you're literally looking at holes in reality and the great void beyond. It's a beautiful image with horrifying implications. The fabric of our reality is thin, full of punctures, and beyond lies an immeasurable otherness. Throughout the Third Era, scholars and heroes alike had encounters that drove home how alien and non-Euclidean Oblivion can be. Take the Oblivion Crisis for example. Gates to Mehrunes Dagon's Deadlands opened across the Empire. Those who entered found a world that played by different rules within those charred, stormy realms. Jagged cliffs jutted at strange angles, towers built in ways that didn't make sense to mortals. We see similar weirdness in Mankar Cameron's Paradise. Cameron crafted a pocket realm, Gaia Alata, that looked like a serene island but concealed hellish instruments. Cages where prisoners were effectively immortal, endlessly resurrected to be tortured anew. When the hero of Kvatch defeated Cameron, Paradise collapsed into non-existence, ejecting the hero back to Tamriel. One moment you're standing on solid ground, the next you're falling through a formless void and landing back in Nirn. This gave a tangible demonstration that Oblivion obeys different metaphysics. Destroy the reigning will and the entire reality unravels. It's very akin to Lovecraft's The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, or other dimensional tales, pocket realities sustained by incomprehensible powers, where normal cause and effect can break down. Mortals who wander in come out questioning the solidity of their own world. Crucially, by experiencing these realms, people of the Third Era began to grasp that mortal reality is just one geometry among many. The Elder Scrolls lore often mentions that each Daedric prince's realm reflects their nature. So Sheogorath's Shivering Isles is a land of madness given form, literally split into mania and dementia regions. Then there's Vermina's realm Quagmire, glimpsed briefly in Oblivion and also in an Elder Scrolls Online quest and alluded to in books, which is said to be an endless series of nightmare scenarios shifting every few minutes. A traveller might find themselves in an endless hallway that suddenly becomes a quagmire swamp under a black sky, then a cage suspended over an ocean, and so on, potentially forever. The very concept of a stable location is absent there. It's pure chaotic flux, a realm where reality melts like wax. This is Lovecraftian dreamscape horror dialed up. At least Randolph Carter's Dreamlands had consistent topography. Quagmire is more like a fever dream from which you cannot wake. To mortals that's insanity, but to Vermina, it's home. And of course, looming over all is Hermaeus Mora's Apocrypha, which we discussed earlier in its Second Era context. But tidbits of it were known by the Third Era through the Ogma Infinitum and the stories of Morian Zenas. Zenas attempted to tour Oblivion with the help of Dagoth Ur, a 4,000-year-old Dwemer sorcerer, and vanished in Apocrypha, presumably overwhelmed by what he found there. Eventually he escaped with help from an adventurer. Again, the geometry and structure of Apocrypha defy sense, shifting and moving corridors, almost alive, cities of books float in seas of ink. If a place can be described as Escher meets Lovecraft, Apocrypha is it. And this realm exists simultaneously in the same form in the Third Era and the Fourth. Time means little to a Daedric plane. The important realization here, tying back to cosmic horror, is that Oblivion's non-linear spaces represent the ultimate unknown. By the end of the Third Era, Tamriel's people had concrete proof that normal reality is but a slice of the cosmos. There are doors to places where up is down, where distance is a lie, where thought itself can alter the landscape. The famed Elder Scrolls themselves hint at this. They show prophecy and non-linear time, implying that past, present and future might just be another coordinate to traverse, or devour for the right kind of being. For example, Tiber Septim used a device, the Numidium, that caused a dragon break, fracturing time. Another case of mortal and divine realms colliding, shattering continuity, the Warp in the West. All these events build a picture that reality in Elder Scrolls is fractal and fragile. Euclidean geometry, linear time, natural law, those are provincial rules of Mundus. Step into Oblivion and you're in the wild west of existence where princes shape domains to their whims. To me, that's one of the strongest Lovecraftian currents in the series, the idea that if you push at the corners of the world, you'll find corners don't exist. The world is round? Cute. Go to Oblivion and you might find it's a Mobius strip or a swirling chaos with no form at all. As a player, one moment you're fighting bandits on the roads of Cyrodiil, the next you're plunging into a gate and seeing a bizarre world that operates under insane rules and hearing Daedric war horns from all directions at once. When I reflect on the close of the Third Era, the Oblivion Crisis and the Shivering Isles events, I realise Bethesda was essentially destroying the notions of a safe, knowable world that the hero's journey can neatly contain. Sure, Martin Septim makes the ultimate sacrifice and the gates of Oblivion close, but the knowledge of those other realms can't be put back in the bottle. The Empire literally rewrote the calendar after Oblivion. We move from the Third Era to the Fourth Era, as if acknowledging a new reality. In-universe, how many minds were opened or broken by what they saw? I love to imagine scholarly circles in the Imperial City in the early Fourth Era poring over reports of these realms. Perhaps they try to chart non-Euclidean geometries or replicate Daedric architecture, driving themselves a bit mad in the process, like the real-world architects who try to design Escher-like buildings. The shift is permanent. Tamrielites now know their universe is one where normal rules are a local anomaly. From a thematic stance, this enriches the cosmic horror vibe. The veil has been lifted. As Lovecraft wrote in The Call of Cthulhu, we live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. Well, by the end of the Third Era, Tamriel has voyaged far indeed, and those black seas of infinity, Oblivion, have washed ashore. The comfort of ignorance is lost. The challenge of the Fourth Era and beyond will be how to contextualize mortal life in this vast eldritch cosmos. It's a question the Elder Scrolls series keeps exploring to our delight and the characters' dread. In short, Oblivion's non-Euclidean reality ensures that Tamriel will never become too cozy a world, that there will always be corners of existence where mortals stumble and dimensions don't line up, and where the angle of the walls might drive you insane, quite literally. Before moving on to the Fourth Era, the Third Era had a couple of other notable mentions. First off, we're going to look at Manimarco, the King of Worms, the most powerful necromancer of the age, achieves a sort of apotheosis in some realities at the end of Daggerfall's events. He becomes the necromancer's moon, literally an undead celestial presence. There's an in-game book, Necromancer's Moon, in Oblivion describing how a new dark orb called the Revenant appeared in the sky, which priests of the worm cult say is Manimarco, now a god sending down veils of dark magic, the shade of the Revenant, to aid necromancers. The idea of a sorcerer ascending to godhood and manifesting as a malignant celestial body is pretty unsettling and unusual. It's reminiscent of cosmic horror in that an arrogant mortal defied the natural order and became something unnatural in the firmament. While Manimarco in Oblivion is depicted as a mortal lich, perhaps a fragment of him, the cult truly believes their god is the actual Dark Moon. This dual existence is mind-bending. It's not explicitly Lovecraft-inspired, but thematically it's the whole meddling with powers beyond mortal ken cautionary tale. And next, we touched upon the Shivering Isles earlier, but there's a specific element to it that I want to dig into. This expansion is more Alice in Wonderland meets psychology than Lovecraft, focusing on madness via the Daedric prince Sheogorath. However, interestingly, the antagonist of Shivering Isles is Jiggalag, Prince of Order, whose forces, the Knights of Order, are crystalline, emotionless entities seeking to erase the madness of Sheogorath's realm. The Knights of Order appear as relentless, faceless, armoured golems that emerge from strange obelisks. While not exactly Lovecraftian, the concept of an alien order consuming a chaotic world has a cosmic feel, like a universe where pure law becomes a horror as implacable as any monster. Pico Blaze's analysis even noted mild cosmic horror elements in Shivering Isles, with inhuman expressions of order threatening the realm. It's a flip of typical Lovecraft themes. Usually it's chaos that's scary, not order. But the key is the inhumanness. These entities can't be reasoned with or fully understood by mortal minds. They just methodically unmake reality into a sterile form. Fighting the Knights of Order is a bit like fighting sentient statutes or a living math problem. It lacks the visceral, wriggling horror, but it has the existential horror of, what if the universe is a mechanistic, unfeeling thing that will steamroll the vivacity of life? A stretch, perhaps, but worth noting as a unique twist on cosmic dread. And finally, we touched on Elder Scrolls and blindness earlier, but in Oblivion's Thieves Guild questline, we actually steal an Elder Scroll from the Imperial Palace. There's a cool little aside that we pick up during the quest. The Chief Librarian is unable to inventory them because they seem to fluctuate in number and placement for no discernible reason. The implication being that the scrolls don't obey normal reality. That's just a small lore bit, but again a nod to the idea that some things in this world are not bound by the rules, a personification of the unknown. Anyway, with all that being said, we're now going to move on to the Fourth Era, where the biggest, tentacliest set piece of all awaits and returns in Skyrim's Dragonborn DLC. By the Fourth Era, Tamriel had seen some stuff. The Oblivion crisis and other calamities are behind it. The world is in a bit of post-apocalyptic recovery. The Empire fractured, the dragons about to return. Yet, it is in this time that one of the most overt cosmic horror adventures unfolds for the player. The Dragonborn DLC for Skyrim, set on the island of Solstheim. Here, Bethesda basically said, let's take Lovecraft and turn it up to 11 in a fantasy setting. The result? The Daedric Prince Hermaeus Mora takes centre stage, and we literally journey through his eldritch domain of Apocrypha in search of forbidden knowledge. So let's set the scene. On Solstheim, the indigenous dark elf population around Raven Rock and other inhabitants of the island start acting weird. They are compelled to build strange structures around the Allmaker stones on the island. When snapped out of it, they awake with no memory of what they've been doing, feeling as if they've just awoken from a nightmare. It turns out they have fallen under the influence of Marak, a dragon priest who, ages past, betrayed the dragons and swore himself to Hermaeus Mora. Marak has been in Apocrypha for millennia, growing in knowledge and power, and now he's reaching out to control minds on Nirn. The setup is again very Lovecraft, a long-dead or long-lost cult leader influencing the living through arcane means, preparing for his return. When reading one of Hermaeus Mora's Black Books, the Dragonborn is drawn into Apocrypha, where Marak immediately recognises them as a rival. Every Black Book found on Solstheim then becomes a route deeper into his domain. The Black Books themselves are literal Lovecraftian artefacts. Each Black Book in the game is an ominous tome. Reading it doesn't just give you information, it transports your consciousness directly into Apocrypha, into a pocket of Hermaeus Mora's realm. This is akin to opening a portal by reading the Necromonicon. The first time it happens, it's shocking, your screen warps and suddenly you're in a bizarre place with oily green sky and endless rows of books. In Apocrypha, as realised in Skyrim, the cosmic horror aesthetic hits full stride. This Goomba Stomp article described it vividly. Comprised primarily of a boiling green sea and a sky filled with writhing tentacles with dilapidated cathedral-like buildings. And everywhere there are shelves, stacks, piles and vortices of books, guarded by Cthulhu-faced seekers and fish-like lurkers. Incomprehensible realms accessed through dreams and words of arcane tomes are deeply rooted in the Lovecraft mythos. Knowledge not meant to be known begets madness, and Hermaeus Mora is a perfect example. Indeed, as you navigate Apocrypha, you almost feel your character's sanity on the line, even if mechanically it isn't represented. Books fly off shelves or burst into flocks of aggressive paper. Lurkers lurch to swat at you with tentacle arms. The ambient sound is a wet, squelching creepiness with whispers on the wind. Visually, it's part decaying library, part alien ocean, part nightmarish archive. In one of the Apocrypha levels, you walk through a maze of shifting hallways made of books, and if you read the tomes, the halls will rearrange themselves. The level design itself is madly shifting, not randomly, but it feels surreal. All of this is not just for spookiness, it ties into the theme that Hermaeus Mora's knowledge is infinite and dangerous. We actually speak to Hermaeus Mora several times during the Dragonborn quest. He manifests as a giant mass of tentacles with one or more eyes, and he speaks in a slobbery, guttural yet oddly scholarly voice. He's not overtly hostile to you, in fact he offers you power and knowledge in exchange for doing his bidding. But his every word drips with ancient menace. At one point, he casually murders the Skald's shaman by impaling him with a tentacle because he's after the secrets he possesses. He truly is a Lovecraftian god, incomprehensible in form, neither good nor evil, just utterly beyond mortal morals, hoarding secrets. As a GameSpot writer noted, Mora's Cthulhu-esque appearance belies a being that isn't purely evil but definitely is not aligned with mortal well-being. The quest's finale, where you defeat Marak, has Mora himself appear and snatch away Marak with a flurry of tentacles like a kraken dragging prey to the abyss, saying, "Marak harboured fantasies of rebellion against me, learn from his example. Serve me faithfully and you will continue to be richly rewarded." It's a striking moment. The villain is unceremoniously disposed of by an even greater otherworldly force, which reminds everyone who's really in charge. It's akin to an ending where the cult leader gets eaten by the very old one he worshipped, an oft-implied outcome in Lovecraft's tales since the gods have no loyalty. And even before this scene with Mora, the journey to defeat Marak required the player to unravel forbidden knowledge themselves, essentially doing exactly what Lovecraft's protagonists do. You scour Solstheim's ruins to find all the Black Books, each granting some arcane insights. You risk your life and sanity in Apocrypha multiple times to glean secrets needed to counter Marak. It's mostly a fun gameplay mechanic, but symbolically it's like you can't dabble in these secrets unscathed. And I find it poetic that in defeating Marak, the Dragonborn essentially becomes indebted to Hermaeus Mora. Yes, you saved Solstheim, but now Mora expects you to be his new champion. You did, after all, use his knowledge and power. The DLC ends with a slight note of unease. You have what you came for, but Mora is still watching. Now, beyond the Dragonborn DLC, the 4th era also saw a few smaller horror-tinged quests. For example, Vermina's quest Waking Nightmare, where an entire town, Dawnstar, is plagued by nightmares due to Vermina's artifact, the Skull of Corruption, hidden in a temple. This has a real Dreamlands meets psychological horror vibe. You even enter a dream walk via a potion to resolve the trauma, somewhat akin to stories of dream infiltration. Not specifically Lovecraft, though he did have Beyond the Wall of Sleep with entering dreams. There's also the House of Horrors quest in Markarth, where the Daedric Prince Molag Bal traps you in a haunted house and makes you bludgeon a priest. Gruesome and demonic, but more straight horror than cosmic. And of course, Mehrunes Dagon is name-dropped in Skyrim a lot, his mythic Dawn cult, etc. But interestingly, I want to note that the name Dagon is itself from Lovecraft. His short story Dagon is about a sea demon. Bethesda likely borrowed it from real-world myth, the Philistine fish god Dagon, which is also where Lovecraft got it. So it's more of a shared reference than direct homage. Still, when you talk about Dagon and the mythic Dawn in Elder Scrolls, you're inadvertently invoking Lovecraft's The Shadow over Innsmouth again, where the cult worships Dagon. It's just a neat parallel, not an accident I suspect given Bethesda's clear love of Lovecraft. Another example of cosmic horror's influence on Skyrim is the story of the Falmer. Of all Tamriel's peoples, the fate of the Snow Elves is perhaps the most poignantly horrific. Once a proud and cultured race in Skyrim's mythic past, the Snow Elves were driven deep underground by Nordic conquest. There they sought refuge with the Dwemer, a decision that sealed their doom. Legends say the dwarves betrayed their elven refugees, forcing them to consume a toxic fungus as their only food source. Over generations, this fungus blinded and warped the Snow Elves, twisting them into pale, sightless slaves dependent on their Dwemer masters. Imagine the slow horror of that transformation, each generation more degenerated than the last. Eyes milky white and vestigial, skin and hair losing all colour, minds growing feral and hate-filled. The elves' once majestic cities were forgotten, their hymns to Auriel turned to maddened chittering in lightless depths. In Skyrim's 4th era, when the Dragonborn delves into Dwemer ruins, we encounter the descendants of those slaves, the Falmer, called the Betrayed. They are a truly Lovecraftian sight, pale hunched creatures crawling and skittering in the dark, navigating by smell and sound. The Falmer have evolved into monsters, but the tragedy is they weren't always this way. Unlike, say, goblins or trolls, the Falmer are fallen intelligences, a form of civilization collapsed into savagery. This evokes Lovecraft's frequent theme of degenerate once great races, such as the subhuman Martens family in The Lurking Fear, or the denizens of Kinyan in The Mound. There's both horror and pity. We are appalled by the Falmer's cruelty. They kidnap and torture surface dwellers, yet behind their sightless rage lies unspeakable suffering. What makes the Falmer especially eerie is their environmental storytelling. The player finds bizarre Falmer dwellings, twisted insect shell huts and ragged tents clustered in Dwemer ruins. They infest the abandoned halls of their vanished Dwemer overlords, their crude chitin structures jutting from among dead machines. They scurry through the skeletal remains of a far more advanced society, chittering in the dark like rats in the walls. The silence of the Dwemer, since they disappeared long ago, juxtaposed with the scrape and hiss of the Falmer, creates a deeply unnerving atmosphere. One almost feels the anger and anguish in the air, centuries of betrayal and hate echoing off the cavern walls. The Falmer, though degenerated, retained enough cunning to wage guerrilla war on any intruders. Many a clueless spelunker has been ambushed by Falmer lurking behind glimmering fungi or fallen victim to their primitive yet vicious traps. It's very much a descent into the unknown, and it gets worse. Living among the Falmer are chorus insects, giant venomous centipede-like creatures. The imagery is nightmarish, blind elf things swarming out alongside insects from holes in the earth. If one were to stumble upon this as a lone scholar, it'd be like stumbling into Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness, discovering an Antarctic city of devolved cave dwellers. The Falmer presence says, "Here lie the snow elves, or what's left of them." It's both a revelation and a warning. Skyrim's lore provides an even more explicit cosmic horror parallel through Night Paladin Gelebor, one of the last uncorrupted snow elves. In the Dawnguard expansion, Gelebor explains to the player what became of his people. His matter-of-fact recounting of the Dwemer's poison and the downfall of the Falmer is chilling precisely because it's delivered without embellishment or anger, almost resigned. He calls the corrupted ones the betrayed as if the word itself were a proper noun. In his voice you can hear a sadness as infinite as Blackreach's darkness. This scenario, a lone sane member of a lost race describing how his kin turned into monsters, is straight out of cosmic horror literature. Through Gelebor we learn that not all snow elves went underground. A few fought on and died on the surface, preferring death to the fate that awaited below. That small mercy makes the Falmer's plight even more horrific. These were the unlucky ones who lived. In a philosophical sense, the Falmer represent the ultimate degradation of a lineage, a literal fall from grace into the abyss. Their story asks a horrifying question: what if the price of survival is your very soul? For the Falmer, survival meant eating toxins, becoming blind, serving cruel masters, and ultimately losing everything that made them elves. By the Fourth Era, they have no obvious written language and no obvious religion beyond possibly petty totems. No purpose except vengeance and survival. Their civilization hit rock bottom and kept digging, quite literally. This echoes Lovecraft's notion, often problematic in his time but effective in horror, of devolution. The fear that a lineage can regress rather than progress given the wrong circumstances. In Tamriel, this fear is realised not through supernatural curse but through cold, deliberate biology. The Dwemer administered a toxin and nature took its course, warping minds and bodies over centuries. The scientific plausibility makes it all the more chilling. When you encounter Falmer in Skyrim's depths, you're not just fighting random cave monsters, you're coming face to face with a cautionary tale. In their snarls and guttural echoes, one can almost hear the last echo of snow elf poetry twisted into a cry of madness. Next, we're moving on to what is one of my most loathed places in the Elder Scrolls. Yes, I find it to be that creepy and unsettling. The Soul Cairn, which to me stands out as one of the Elder Scrolls universe's most overt visions of cosmic horror in the Fourth Era, and indeed the entirety of the Elder Scrolls. This plane of Oblivion is no Daedric fiefdom but a necromantic aberration, a limbo constructed by enigmatic beings known as the Ideal Masters. Everything about the Soul Cairn's landscape is devised to unsettle. Under a dead, purple sky lit by ghostly flashes of lightning, the terrain stretches out in desolate monotony. Jagged ruins and gravestones jut from ashen soil, and gravity itself feels tenuous. Great obsidian towers rise at weird angles, some broken into floating fragments that hover in defiance of natural law. Stairways lead nowhere, distances warp amid the haze. In this blasted expanse, nothing truly lives or grows. Much of the sparse vegetation takes the form of bizarre soul husks, brittle plants feeding on the realm's perverse energies. The sensory dislocation of the soul cairn evokes Lovecraftian other worlds, a realm entirely removed from mortal logic, where normal geometry and life cycles simply do not apply. Over time, many souls in the cairn seem to lose their grip on who they were, wandering as aimless shades that mutter fragmented pleas, curses, or warnings into the void. It is a place of living death in the most existential sense, a dominion of stagnation that exists outside the comforting rules of Mundus. Presiding over this haunted wasteland are the aforementioned ideal masters, disembodied intelligences of immense power and inscrutable purpose. Common theories suggest the ideal masters may once have been mortal sorcerers who grew so obsessed with souls and eternal life that they discarded their mortal forms and transcended into entities of pure soul energy. In doing so, they escaped the bounds of time, flesh, and linear reality, becoming akin to Lovecraftian cosmic minds that exist in some distant, abstract dimension. They have no tangible bodies in the soul cairn. In fact, according to lore, they seem to exist somewhere beyond the soul cairn itself, only ever interacting with it through crystalline foci and soul gems. Indeed, the masters do not appear as familiar shapes at all. Instead, their presence manifests through the eerie crystal monoliths that dot the landscape. Great soul gem spires that thrum with energy and hunger. These crystals serve as the ideal master's eyes, ears, and mouthpieces, acting as conduits through which they issue commands and siphon off soul energy from their realm. To approach one of the massive ideal master crystals in the cairn is to feel your life force drain away as if the land itself were feeding. Mortals never see any true form of an ideal master, only the great soul gem crystals through which they speak. The deliberate obscurity only heightens their Lovecraftian mystique. Like eldritch gods, the ideal masters are everywhere and nowhere, pervasive in influence yet never revealing a comprehensible shape. One can converse with them, as the apprentice in the Battlespire game does, only by addressing a floating gem behind which an alien intellect coolly observes. The effect is deeply uncanny. One essentially parleys with a sentient force of nature, an intelligence unmoored from any familiar form or empathy. What truly makes the ideal masters terrifying is their utterly alien logic and the grand impersonal design they impose on their domain. These beings see mortal souls not as people but as resources to be harvested, fuel for their power and curios to be collected. In fact, the ideal masters believe they are doing souls a favour by seizing them. They profess that by freeing mortals from life and condemning them to eternal undeath, they are sparing people the hardships of mortal existence and gifting them everlasting peace. This chilling conviction is cosmic horror to the core, an inhuman intelligence offering a perverse kind of salvation that no sane mortal would desire. In one encounter, an ideal master grandly describes the soul cairn as an otherworldly refuge dedicated to peace, love, eternal rest, and harmony. Eternal rest, indeed, in the most nightmarish literal sense. Such claims of benevolence are a cruel veneer over a cosmic abattoir. Under the Master's doctrine, the soul is stripped of free will and bound forever, all in service of a twisted ideal of peace. The illusion of sanctuary here parallels Lovecraftian tales where promises of enlightenment or safety mask far darker ends. In truth, the soul cairn is less an afterlife than a soul farm, a vast harvesting ground built to entrap sentient spirits so the masters can feed. It is believed the soul cairn exists solely so the ideal masters can collect souls and devour their energy, and some hypothesize that the ideal masters even use captured souls as a form of currency in cosmic dealings beyond our understanding. All notions of individual dignity or meaning are erased in this system. Every soul, whether hero or villain, becomes just another nameless unit of spiritual energy to be bartered and consumed. This impersonal horror, the reduction of conscious beings to mere cattle for godlike entities, resonates strongly with Lovecraft's vision of an indifferent cosmos. The ideal master's paradise is the ultimate facade, a pretty lie covering a machinery of eternal imprisonment. The economy of souls that the ideal masters run is built on deceitful bargains, adding a Faustian layer to their cosmic horror. Driven by an insatiable hunger, the Masters strike covenants with ambitious mortals, especially necromancers, promising them knowledge and power in exchange for deliveries of fresh souls. Throughout history, many a mortal mage has been lured by whispers of the ability to summon endless undead legions or unravel immortality's secrets. Boons that ideal masters are willing to offer for the right price. But these dealings are almost always traps. The ideal masters are master manipulators. More often than not, the necromancers who deal with them end up ensnared by their own greed. While necromancers may gain some power, they often fall prey to the masters and end up trapped in the realm themselves. In other words, the house always wins. The masters will happily grant a taste of power if it ultimately delivers another soul into their stockpile. Tellingly, the ideal masters rarely, if ever, expend their own energy to achieve their goals. They prefer to operate through guile and proxies, letting mortal folly do the work. They remain aloof, delegating tasks to their undead servants or to unwitting collaborators, and they intervene directly only when it costs them nothing. This unwillingness to expend effort makes them even more alien. It is as if these beings consider themselves so far above the concerns of the living that even appearing in person would be an unnecessary inconvenience. In Lovecraftian terms, one is reminded of cosmic deities who sleep eternally or send minions rather than stir themselves. The ideal masters exhibit a similar indolent omnipotence, supremely powerful yet eerily detached, content to watch lesser beings dance into their web under false pretenses. The horror here is subtle but profound. Mortals are not even worth a god's wrath or attention, they're just insects to be baited and collected. The alien patience of the ideal masters, sitting in the dark and waiting for souls to come to them, reflects a disturbing cosmic predation. It's a slow, remorseless harvesting of souls on a planar scale, and it reinforces how insignificant human schemes are against these inhuman intelligences. The fates of those who bargain with the ideal masters serve as cautionary tales worthy of a Lovecraftian pen. Take the case of Durnhavir, the dragon who became entangled in the master's web. In ages past, Durnhavir turned to necromancy in a bid to outmatch his draconic rivals. The ideal masters did indeed grant him mighty conjuration powers, but the price was both cruel and crafty. They tasked Durnhavir with guarding one of their most prized acquisitions, Valerica, who sought refuge in the cairn, and neglected to mention that Valerica, being a vampire, could never truly die. Thus, Durnhavir unwittingly agreed to an eternal servitude. He became the jailer of an immortal prisoner, bound to watch over her indefinitely. As years turned to centuries, this proud dragon's flesh withered into undeath, and his spirit became so acclimated to the soul cairn that he can no longer exist outside of it. When the Dragonborn encounters him, Durnhavir is essentially a broken godling. A once majestic being now forced to haunt a graveyard world, lamenting his folly. His story is cosmic irony at its highest order, a seeker of power tricked into shackles much like Lovecraftian protagonists, who pursue immortality or forbidden lore only to meet fates worse than death. And then there are the innocent souls relegated to the soul cairn. Another soul bound in this realm is the Dunmer Saint Jib, famous in life for banishing the cliff racer pests from Vardenfell, who met a tragic end during the Oblivion crisis of the Third Era. A Daedric invader soul-trapped Jib's spirit amid the chaos of Kvatch, casting his soul into the soul cairn. Now Saint Jib endures a half-life in this grey purgatory. When the Dragonborn finds him, Jib is desperate to find the pages of his opus lost in the soul cairn. It's a touching and tragic sight. Even a hero who earned divine accolades in Tamriel is reduced to a wandering ghost in the soul cairn, clinging to fragments of memory, his magnum opus pages. Jib's spirit is confused about where he is exactly, or that he's been trapped in the soul cairn for 200 years. He knows that he was soul trapped, but he thinks he's in a prison. When the player explains where he is and that he's dead, he realises that the player can help him find the pages of his opus. It's unnerving to see someone not quite aware of where they are focus singularly on something that is, in the grand scheme, inconsequential compared to their current predicament. In cosmic horror terms, it's the fate of a righteous man cast into an uncaring universe. His nobility afforded him no special treatment in this cosmic farm. Countless other souls share similar fates. Some wander in confusion, recalling only slivers of what they were, while others like Jib try futilely to continue routines of their past life. The ideal masters make no distinctions of worth or virtue. To them, all souls are equally negligible once caught. This flattening of destiny is deeply Lovecraftian. It reflects an existential dread that no matter one's deeds in life, a soul might end up just another item in a cosmic collection to be toyed with or drained at leisure. Even the act of entering the soul cairn highlights the existential dread of its design. This realm does not suffer the living to trespass lightly. In gameplay terms, the Dragonborn and Serana discover that the portal to the cairn will reject the living, preventing any mortal with an intact soul from crossing its threshold. The only ways to gain entry are to taint oneself with undeath, for example by becoming a vampire, or to surrender a part of one's soul in a ritual. In the Dawnguard story, the last Dragonborn faces this dire choice. Either accept Serana's gift of vampirism or allow a portion of their soul to be magically trapped as the entry toll. Either option is unsettling. To choose the latter, as many do, is to literally sacrifice a piece of your essence for the privilege of walking in this hellscape. Once inside, the soul trap's effect is palpable. The Dragonborn is afflicted by a weakened soul condition that saps their strength and vitality, a sign that the cairn itself is leeching their life force. Valerica notes that only the undead or those whose soul is partly ensnared can survive the crossing, which means every living visitor must first become, in a way, part of the ideal master's system. This is a powerful metaphor for forbidden knowledge in a Lovecraftian sense. Just as Lovecraft's characters must trade sanity or humanity for insight into cosmic secrets, any mortal who seeks the soul cairn's secrets must mortgage their soul to get there. The requirement that you die a little or entirely to even glimpse this plane speaks to the horrific cost of cosmic truth. Stepping into the soul cairn is not a heroic adventure so much as an initiation into Oblivion, a one-way journey that leaves an indelible mark on the soul. It's implied that even if one leaves, a part of them never does. Some of the Dragonborn's soul remains bound in that realm unless reclaimed. And who can say what metaphysical scars such a separation leaves behind? The liminal state of being neither fully alive nor truly dead while in the cairn drives home the idea that to interface with these cosmic forces is to forfeit one's place in the mortal world. In Lovecraft's work, knowledge from beyond often carries a curse. In the Elder Scrolls, the soul cairn makes that literal. The partial death required to enter is a threshold no sane person would cross if they understood its implications. All of these elements coalesce into a portrait of the soul cairn as a nightmarish echo of Lovecraftian horror within Tamriel. The realm itself is an exercise in dissonance and dread, a place where the impersonal forces of the cosmos visibly hold sway. Wanderers in the cairn are confronted with the insignificance of their mortal struggles, as the ideal master's treatment of souls lays bare a terrifying truth. In the grand scheme, sentient lives are cheap currency. There is a palpable dread of eternal stasis that hangs over the land. One realises that in this Oblivion pocket, death is not an escape or a cycle but a permanent state of inertia. Lovecraft wrote of fates worse than death, and here we see one, an eternity of undeath without agency, where the self decays not into rot but into irrelevance. The uncanny architecture of the soul cairn, with its floating structures and endless darkness, reinforces the feeling that mortal eyes are seeing something they were not meant to see. The inner workings of a cosmic meat grinder. In Lovecraft's mythos, protagonists often go mad from glimpsing the cosmos's indifference. In Skyrim, one can almost feel that madness creeping in while exploring the soul cairn's endless waste. The ideal masters, for their part, embody the terrifying inscrutability of cosmic intelligences. They do not hate mortals, they simply use them much as a person might farm animals. A fundamentally alien mindset that is neither evil in the human sense nor remotely compassionate. Their dialogue, when it occurs, oozes condescension and otherness as they speak of gifts of eternal life and chastise those who don't show proper deference. It's the same tone one might imagine the great old ones adopting if they deigned to explain themselves. And, like those eldritch deities, the ideal masters pursue goals that mock human ideals of honour or justice. Their idea of peace is a silence of the grave, their harmony is the orderly siphoning of souls. The impersonality of this cosmic vision is what truly lingers in my mind. In the Soul Cairn, one confronts a microcosm of a Lovecraftian universe, a place where hope and horror are one and the same, where a promise of eternal love becomes indistinguishable from eternal captivity. It is a prison disguised as a sanctuary, a grotesque farm where souls are both the harvest and the soil. To stand on its ashen plains amid swirling soul mist and under the gaze of unseen masters is to feel the cold cosmic truth that the Elder Scrolls has so expertly woven into its lore, that beyond the world of the living lies an abyss of uncaring intellects and alien designs, against which mortal life means precisely nothing. In this way, the Soul Cairn and its ideal masters deliver one of the most potent Lovecraftian nightmares in all of Tamrielic lore. A stark reminder that sometimes death is only the beginning, and for some in Tamriel, the beginning of an endless, inescapable horror. Moving on to our next example, most high fantasy settings have an apocalyptic threat, but the Elder Scrolls puts a unique cosmic horror spin on it with Alduin the World Eater. In Skyrim's main story, Alduin appears as an immensely powerful dragon, seemingly just another big bad to slay. But delve into Nordic lore and you uncover something far more disturbing. Alduin is a god of cycle, destined to devour the world at the end of time and trigger its rebirth. The Nords believe Alduin's coming heralds the end of the current Kalpa world age and the beginning of the next. In other words, Alduin isn't merely a local cataclysm, he's the literal world eater, a cosmic entity fulfilling a primordial function. This concept of repeating apocalypses is deeply Lovecraftian in its insignificance of mortals. Think of Lovecraft's Yog-Sothoth or Azathoth, cosmic beings tied to the fabric of reality, devouring or unmaking existence as a matter of course. Alduin serves a similar purpose in the Elder Scrolls mythology, a dragon that, when the time comes, unhinges his jaws and ends the universe. The word itself, Kalpa, is straight out of Hindu and esoteric lore. The Elder Scrolls loves its myth parallels, highlighting the grand scale of it all. For the average Nord peasant, these are terrifying creation myths whispered by the fire. For the player who unearths ancient tablets or listens to the dragon Paarthurnax, it becomes clear that this myth is real. At some point, Alduin will succeed in eating the world. Maybe not this era since the Dragonborn fights him off, but eventually. This casts every victory in a fragile light. Unlike a typical fantasy victory where you permanently save the day, here you've only bought time. The universe of Elder Scrolls is fundamentally unstable, it would seem, destined to cycle. That existential impermanence, the idea that all of Mundus will be consumed in flame and reshaped from its ashes, adds a layer of cosmic dread to an otherwise heroic saga. During the Skyrim main quests, you get a taste of this cyclical doom through the prophecy of the Elder Scroll and the Hall of Stories on Alduin's wall. Carvings there depict the ancient dragon war and a prophecy of Alduin's return. One cannot help but feel a chill as you realise your struggle against Alduin might have played out countless times before in past Kalpas. This aligns with Paarthurnax's musings after Alduin's defeat. The old dragon wonders if the world was spared or merely delayed in its fate. In fact, Paarthurnax likens a Kalpa to the egg of the next world and suggests Alduin's defeat by the Dragonborn has stopped the end in its tracks. Think about that. By using an Elder Scroll to banish Alduin in the past and then slaying him in the present, humans essentially hacked the natural order, an order that perhaps needed Alduin to destroy and renew the world. This is classic cosmic horror irony. The heroes, in trying to save their world, may have broken the cosmic cycle entirely. What consequences might that have? The game doesn't spell it out, but speculative lore hints that a stalled apocalypse could be even worse. It's reminiscent of Ragnarok in Norse myth. What if you prevented it? In the Elder Scrolls, some fans theorise that by postponing the Kalpa's end, reality might degrade or the next world's birth is put on hold. The cosmic order has been disturbed by mortal action, a trope Lovecraft would approve of, where messing with cosmic timelines courts madness. From a thematic standpoint, Alduin's shadow stretches beyond his defeat. In the Fourth Era, people live in a post-dragon world thinking the doom has passed, but the player, and lore-savvy characters like Paarthurnax or the College of Winterhold scholars, know a larger truth: the World Eater was real and thus the Kalpic cycle is real. It's like surviving Cthulhu waking but knowing he's part of a pantheon that will eventually succeed. There's an undercurrent of futility and awe. To drive home the cosmic scale, consider that other cultures within the Elder Scrolls have their own World Eaters. The Redguards speak of Satakal, a serpent that eats itself, world skin after world skin in an eternal cycle. And the Khajiit have Alkahan, a soul-devouring draconic demon. There are analogues in other Elder Scrolls cultures as well. Different names, similar nightmare. This suggests the entire Elder Scrolls cosmos is built on a looping death-rebirth mechanism, a far cry from a linear Tolkien-esque universe. The very law of time is static change, like a coiled serpent, as Vivek put it. That definitely qualifies as non-human existential horror. We're living not in an eternal creation of a loving God, but in a snow globe that periodically gets shattered and remade. And worst of all, one of the Shatterers flew overhead and tried to burn us alive. The visceral encounter with Alduin masks the deeper horror of his nature. Slaying him doesn't solve the puzzle of how to escape the next ending. For all we know, the clock is now ticking anew on some distant Kalpa timer. All this elevates Skyrim's story from mere fantasy epic to something with a cosmic bent. Players might initially just think evil dragon must kill, but by game's end, when you vanquish Alduin in Sovngarde, you're left pondering if you've done right by the cosmos. In a Lovecraft story, such an inversion, heroes foiling an elder god's duty, would have dire fallout, often unseen but looming. The Elder Scrolls leaves it more open, but the mood is similar, a mix of triumph and cosmic insignificance. As you walk out of Sovngarde and gaze at Skyrim's sky, you might recall that those stars above are actually holes into eternity, Magnus's escape wounds in the sky, and that beyond them lies Aetherius, the place where souls go and Kalpas maybe get reborn. The knowledge is humbling. Alduin may be gone for now, but the cosmic cycle he personifies churns on, largely indifferent to the mortals scurrying below. In true cosmic horror fashion, the most we achieved was to slightly postpone the inevitable. In Tamriel, as in Lovecraft's universe, even dragonborn heroes can't put an end to the great grinding mechanisms of the cosmos. At best, we ride the wheel a while longer, hoping against hope that the gears never catch us. As we conclude our study of the Fourth Era's cosmic horror, what's striking is that those elements have not diminished, they've actually become more front and centre set pieces. The tone and aesthetic of cosmic horror in particular really shone in Apocrypha's depiction. It was a contrast to the rest of Skyrim's world. Skyrim proper is all snowy mountains, Nords, dragons, high fantasy. Apocrypha was like stepping into a painting by H.R. Geiger or a scene from a Lovecraftian nightmare. And more so than any of the other cosmic horror examples I picked up upon in the Fourth Era, this juxtaposition actually heightens the impact. Just as Fallout's retro war setting made its Lovecraftian bits pop, in the Elder Scrolls the usual medieval fantasy makes these intrusions of alien horror even more stark. We as the player feel it. One minute you're fighting bandits and bears with a sword, the next you're reading an Elder Scroll atop the throat of the world and getting flung through time, or you're talking to a tentacled void god. It's exhilarating and disorienting in that special way cosmic horror should be. So, having journeyed through all these eras and examples, we can step back and appreciate how cosmic horror is woven into the Elder Scrolls franchise's DNA. It's often in the margins, hinted in books, side quests, or optional encounters, but it's persistently there, adding depth and darkness to an already rich world. And then there's some of it front and centre right in the middle of main quest storylines. Whatever the case, the tone of these moments is distinct. The Elder Scrolls normally empowers the player as a classic hero, slayer of dragons, saviour of Tamriel. But when the cosmic horror peeks through, it smartly shifts to unsettling, investigative, and often humbling. You're not slaying Hermaeus Mora, that's unthinkable. You're bargaining or fleetingly cooperating with him. You're not curing the world of the Deep One's existence, you're just rescuing one victim and getting the heck out of Hackdirt. These segments make the player feel small in a big, uncaring cosmos, which is exactly Lovecraft's central theme: the insignificance of humanity or mortals in the face of the infinite. Why does this matter? Because it adds that horror of the unknown element to a genre that can sometimes get too comfortable with clear answers. In Tamriel, not everything is known even to the in-universe scholars. There's always another layer of reality or history that is obfuscated, dangerous, and, a lot of the time, awe-inspiring. So, in sum, the Elder Scrolls series masterfully mirrors many Lovecraftian tropes and themes across its games and lore. Ancient unknowable beings, forbidden knowledge that exacts a price, hidden cults and deranged worshippers, dream manipulation, lost civilization with mysterious fates, artifacts that defy natural law, and a pervasive sense that outside the gilded cage of mortal perception lies a void filled with both wonder and terror. As Lovecraft himself wrote, the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. A lesson Tamriel's inhabitants, and we as players, learn again and again.